Manhunt Season 4 is now open, and for the first target, agents are tasked with locating Bridgette Douglas, codename Viper. Viper brings some interesting additions to the story, including the first confirmed Black Tusk recruitment from outside of the US military, and a possible link to other waves of Division agents that are yet to be activated. Viper is the only child of Charles Douglas, the co-founder of a military equipment company. She grew up on a secluded, luxurious estate in the Scottish Highlands. After graduating from university, Viper completed an 8-year stint in the SAS before taking a position in her father's company, Douglas & Harding, as a logistics and supply specialist. However, when the dollar flu outbreak hit, she was immediately contacted by the Black Tusk, yet this was after she was recruited by the Strategic Homeland Division. Completely disregarding her father's opposition to the idea, she joined up the BTSU shortly after. Fast forward a few months, Fei Lau has sided with Schaefer and the BTSU. She was inducted into the group, meeting several prominent members, and Viper was among them.
SAS? That's impressive. Logistics and supply specialist? Not that impressive. You shouldn't do that. Do what? Sell yourself short. You are impressive. You didn't have to join the services. Rich girl like you had other options. Just because my father has money, it doesn't mean I'm some spoiled rich girl. I can take care of myself. Your record proves that. You joined the Black Tusk in December? That's correct. Before you were activated. I was never activated. Guess they're still saving some of us for the real end times. Does Schaefer know your division? He never asked, and I didn't think it was worth bringing up until it was a problem. Smart. I like smart women. Me too.
Being that Fei Lau was the acting division commander in New York, she would have had access to highly confidential intel and was aware of Viper's recruitment into the division. Viper was keeping this information from Schaefer, and she chose to hold this information from him, unless approached about it. She had spent her whole life having people assume that she has it easy, everything given to her on a silver platter, and that she had no idea of the stresses and complications that the average person faced. But through issues with her father in their earlier years, she did her utmost to separate herself from the privileged lifestyle and carve her own path, and this just happened to be in a direction that her father wouldn't approve of, which probably only made the path that much more appealing. Following the outbreak, Charles Douglas can be seen talking to his business partner, John Harding.
John, in the 27 years we spent building DNH, have you ever known me to be a paranoid lunatic?
Of course not. But there is no conspiracy, Charles. Everyone's just preparing. All this panic will die down soon enough.
Someone is freezing us out. We supply militaries, for God's sake. If we can't book factory time, this company is going down the pan.
Look, forget about this conspiracy theory of yours. There's no secret cabal trying to freeze us out. Let's just focus on sorting out this mess.
I swear, something big is happening.
Fine. Think what you want. I don't have enough energy to fight you on this right now.
With the current state of Washington DC and the rest of America, it was having an effect on business, with the closing down of factories and inadequate numbers to run them. Charles was certain that there was something going on that was targeting DNH weapons manufacturing. However, not long after this conversation, John Harding would pass away due to complications from influenza. As the situation continued to get worse in DC, Charles eventually relocated to the White House, where he is working, and I use this term very loosely, as the range officer in the shooting range. As a father, Charles was very hard on Viper. She found him a difficult man to please, who was constantly critical towards everything she did, and would often downplay her achievements. This in turn resulted in her moving in life directions that were against his will. Although this meant she was forced to grow up to be strong and independent, she still bears the scars of a very critical upbringing. Viper doesn't think particularly highly of herself, and tends to be a little insecure around her abilities.
You're sure he's at the White House? That's what Kelso said. He's running a shooting range and drinking dandelion coffee from a very fancy espresso machine. Oh, well that sounds like my dad. He's doing great. Found a way to make himself useful. He was lucky. Never caught the virus and still has all his parts. Aside from the dandelion instead of his regular Kopi Luwak, it sounds like his life hasn't changed much. He's still in the lab getting people to test his equipment and probably making them feel really insecure about their accuracy. You miss him? Of course. But when something like this happens, you have to do what you think is right. I'm glad we each found something. Even if he is actively making my life harder. Which, yeah, that hasn't really changed much either.
Leading up to the operation, Faye discusses the role that Viper will play.
I'm best in a support role. You don't want to lead your own team? I prefer to be in a support role. I get that. Some people aren't cut out to make the hard choices. Oh, that's not what I'm worried about. What are you worried about? Being responsible for my team's life. You'll make sacrifices to save them. No. That I'll consider their deaths an acceptable loss. We know what we signed up for. We assume this is a suicide mission. If you make it back home, that's the unexpected outcome. You worried about survivor's guilt? Can't be worried about something you can't control, and every mission I come back from, I never feel guilty. Not about being the one that comes back. Other shit? Sure. But never that I survived.
Viper isn't interested in leading a team, not because she's scared of the responsibility, more that she's worried about treating them as expendable. In her career, she was always aware of what they were there for, and that there was a chance that they may never return. But in this situation, the men she would lead would be relying on her to keep them alive. Regardless, Faye pushed her out of her comfort zone and assigned her a squad.
How's it feel? Good. Weird. I like being in charge, but yeah, it's weird being the one people are looking to for guidance. Your team speaks highly of you, Viper. You're a natural leader. Likeable, kind, tough when you need to be. They respect you, but aren't intimidated by you. Cool? That's hard to pull off. Especially for a woman. Thanks. I try not to be a bitch. I'm still working on that one.
To Viper's surprise, she was actually quite suited to the task of leading a team. She is a valuable and well-respected leader. When instructed to do so, Viper set forth, executing her part in the operation. Taking her band of BTSU, she started creating havoc in the southern districts of Washington, D.C. Multiple sites of interest were captured in West Potomac, East Mall, Southwest, and also the Pentagon. One by one, the division took back these areas, eliminating all Black Tusk who engaged them. Eventually they managed to catch up with Viper. Although she put up a strong resistance, the agents managed to put a stop to her activities and take her down, in turn removing Faye Lau's first lieutenant from the field. It isn't clear what Viper's part in this operation was, but through continuing to hunt down the remainder of the lieutenants, Faye's plan and location should hopefully become known. Viper's story is an interesting addition for a couple of reasons. Firstly, she's the first known operative that the Black Tusk have recruited that wasn't from the US military. Secondly, she says she was never activated. Is this proof that there was a third wave of division agents that were never released? Well, to be honest, I'm not convinced. Barton Schaefer was the man that knew everything. Through the Black Tusk, he has ties within the government, who has fed him considerable intel on the division, including their agents. I find it very hard to believe that he didn't know of her involvement with the SHD, regardless of whether she was activated or not. Plus, was she just hiding her watch and division gear this whole time? Then there is our initial briefing on this manhunt. As Kelso did with the other manhunts we've had up until now, she gave us a quick rundown of the targets we'd be coming up against. In her words, Viper dropped off the radar not long after being activated in the first wave.
Bridgette Douglas, call sign Viper. She's a chemical logistics and supply specialist. Dropped off our radar not long after being activated in the first wave.
So, is Viper lying about not being activated, both to those around her and even herself over time? Or was Kelso just wrong and merely assumed? That doesn't really sound like a particularly accurate briefing, and what would she gain from making that up? Kelso must have gotten the intel from somewhere, surely. Another thing that bugs me, which probably means absolutely nothing, is the fact that her watch is very obviously red, which makes sense, she's a rogue agent after all. But if we remember back to the start, agents waiting to be activated were usually notified by their watch. When the orange ring lit up, they knew that their next steps would be to make their way to the safe house and assemble with the rest of their cell. For her to be flagged as rogue, would she not have had to be activated as an active agent first? Are the watchers even able to do anything before being activated? Of course, there really could be some simple explanation for this, like maybe Faye gave her a watch when assembling the crew. Perhaps it was activated when joining the rogue network. But that doesn't really make sense, because if she was never activated in the first place, how would Keener have gotten in contact with her? Plus she was working with the Black Tusk, so Keener certainly wouldn't have helped them. I don't know. With the limited amount of information we've been given, there are a number of different rabbit holes we could go down to try and explain why or why not she chose to do this. But my opinion is that she was activated, either before or while working with the Black Tusk. But for one reason or another, she chose not to tell Barden or Faye the truth. But what do you guys think? Let me know. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!